Welcome back, boxing fans, to another great show with Sean on boxing. So this weekend, a card which I guess is a Canadian promoted card, along with, of course, Top Rank Boxing, is coming out with a great fight card this weekend. Not some of the biggest or baddest names in the land, but some really good up and coming fighters, a lot of upside, and some fighters that represent really exciting divisions in boxing. I'm not going to talk about all the fights from this card, but I'm going to talk about a few of the bigger fights, actually 5 of them. So let's get this started with one of the most exciting, young, up and coming American fighters in the sport, and that is Abdullah Mason. Obviously, Abdullah Mason is getting tons of props, tons of hype. He's a kid that looks like the future already, right? Obviously, he still hasn't had 10-round fights, and he still has things to do, but, he's a young kid, and obviously, Top Rank knows how to build up and move young fighters. They've done that for fucking decades. So he's just another example of a young fighter being moved by Top Rank in that way. He's obviously in one of the best divisions of boxing at 135 pounds, but he's a big kid who's easily going to be able to transition to 140, 147, and potentially even 154, and maybe higher. Currently at 130 pounds, he's not one of the top 10 fighters in boxing, but he's one of the top fighters in that division as far as somebody that people are keeping an eye on. He's going to be fighting Mike Ohan Jr., a good opponent. Obviously, at this point, they're gradually building him up step by step, putting him in with experienced fighters, guys that are going to be able to test him and help build his experience, right? Maybe allow him to go 10 rounds or 8 rounds, whatever this fight is scheduled for, and obviously continue to learn and develop. A kid like him, he needs to be put in with some quality opposition, just so that he's forced, to go through some tough times. Because if it's too easy for him, he's never really going to develop. He's never going to really get to his best. He's going to really leave his best in the gym and not really showcase it in the ring. It'll be interesting to see how Mike Ohan does against Abdullah Mason. Obviously, we're hoping that he gives him a good opponent. But, if my prediction was on point, I would expect Abdullah Mason to get him out sometime inside the first 6 rounds. And of course, Abdullah Mason is just improving all the time. And the kid is super exciting. I mean, he's got the same physicality of Floyd Mayweather, about 5'8", with like a 72, 73-inch reach. Maybe he's closer to a Bud Crawford. I think he might be a little longer than Floyd. But a great build for moving up, and obviously the future looks bright. You got to wear shades. Then you have Jai Tucker. Jai Tucker was one of these up-and-coming U.S. Olympic fighters, obviously very good amateur pedigree, moved through Top Rank and developed, but has shown some inconsistency so far. Even though he does have a lot of ability, obviously he's still a young kid, right? Tall, long, pretty exciting fighter, but obviously he's a guy that has shown some flaws, unlike an Abdullah Mason. So it'll be interesting to see how he progresses and moves forward. Sometimes having a few fallbacks early on in your career is just something that helps you develop and become better. Because, going through those hurdles focuses you, keeps you sharp, and makes you understand that you're not a finished product and you got to put in the work. And you can't let your head get above you, right? And maybe a guy like Jai Tucker, maybe that was the problem. He was feeling himself and he needed a wake-up call. He's going to be fighting Santiago Fernandez, another, veteran fighter. Obviously, it'll be interesting to see how he looks. At this point, they want him to progress. He's kind of a Tommy Hearns looking type of guy. Not to say he's going to be as good as Tommy Hearns, but obviously you just want to have him get to his best. Be his best, develop to be the best fighter available. And regardless of how great that is, as anybody, you can only get as good as you can get, and hopefully that will help you earn money, have a great career, and then we'll see potentially what your upside ultimately is. Then, of course, we have Aslanbek Mukhmedov, the Eastern European, now Canadian, fighting out of Canada, or Canada, as we like to call it in Canada. Obviously, he's a Canadian promoted fighter, part of this Canadian top rank sort of double promotional card. He's going to be fighting top rank fighter Guido Vernello, another very good up and coming heavyweight. Obviously, a guy with very good amateur pedigree as well. It'll be interesting to see how these two fighters match up. Obviously, both of them have been through some hurdles in their career. Both of them have been stopped, I think, from my memory. And so they're both still young, and obviously both guys that continue to improve moving forward. This is a good test. Guido's a skilled fighter, obviously a hard puncher. Aslanbek Madmudov had just been a monster who's been walking guys down and bombing them out, of course, until he ran into the tough Turkish-German kid who schooled his ass and sent him back to Canada, with a whole new perspective on boxing. Big, slow, hard puncher. That's going to get you somewhere, but it's not going to get you everywhere. And he learned that the hard way. For Guido Vernelli, a guy who's a little more skilled, a little more fluid, but, obviously has had some problems of his own. So it's going to be a good test between two good up-and-coming heavyweights. Obviously, this is the kind of fight they both should have because they're going to get paid well, but it's also going to help them improve. You can't consistently have low-level opposition who don't give you a challenge. This is a good challenge. It's a tough prediction fight. I'm not really sure who to predict, but I will lean towards my Canadian brethren, Makhmudov. Then, of course, you have one of the most exciting up-and-coming 168-pound fighters in boxing, Ulysses Iglesias. He is the new Cuban to pay attention to at 168 pounds. Now that, of course, my man David Morrell moved up to 175. It's a sad situation. I mean, Benavidez moving up, he's a weight bully who it was inevitable that he was going to move up. But with David Morrell, I think he could have easily stayed at 168. And it's a little bit of a shame that he left, especially considering that 168 pounds is such a stacked division. When you look at a guy like Iglesias, great amateur pedigree, the kid looks the real deal as a pro. Young, skilled, explosive. He is exactly what people love in a boxer, right? A guy that shows you skill, can outbox you, but then if he lands a big shot, it's fucking lights out. His future looks bright. If he learns English like Dave Morrell does, that's obviously going to be even more beneficial. We know historically Cubans haven't really done very well in the U.S. market. They haven't sold very well, but a lot of that had to do with the stylistic sort of style they brought into the pro game, which obviously wasn't always the most entertaining of styles. But Ulysses Iglesias is completely different. He's a lot more like Dave Morrell. Both of them are super exciting. Unlike their fellow countryman, William Skull, who obviously is going to be fighting for that vacant IBF title. William Skull, on the other hand, is a much more typical Cuban fighter, much more of a boxer and mover, a guy who's more of a defense-first type of fighter. Iglesias is going to be fighting Sena Agbeko. This is a guy that he should look good against. This fight probably doesn't go more than 4 rounds. Look forward to Ulysses Iglesias to bomb this fucking dude out and get a spectacular knockout and move forward in his career at 168 pounds. There's a lot of real good fighters just at that level below elite, and you could match any of them together and you have potentially fight of the year quality. Ulysses Iglesias is one of those fighters. Keep an eye on him if you haven't seen him. This is a good opportunity for you to showcase this kid because I guarantee you will be impressed. And then, of course, you have the main card, and this is a great matchup. You have Christian Mbilli, obviously a Cameroon French fighter who's situated in Canada, fighting and promoted out of Canada. Obviously a very good amateur pedigree, an aggressive professional style boxer, a guy that puts pressure on guys, throwing hooks, and just beating guys down. He's super fun to watch. A lot of power, very athletic, a very aggressive fighter who throws a lot. He's going to be fighting Sergey Dervachenko. And we saw what Sergey Dervachenko's done recently. We saw his fight with Jaime Munguia. That fight was dynamite. Dynamite. He gave Jaime Munguia everything Jaime Munguia could ask for. It was a really tough back and forth matchup between those two fighters. And now he's stepping in to fight Mbilli. Shit. Man, this fight easily could be fight of the year. Because you know Dervachenko ain't coming to roll over. He ain't coming to lose. He ain't coming to fucking, hang up his gloves. He's coming to get that big win that he's been looking for a long time. And for Christian Mbilli, he's looking for that guy that he can hang his hat on. A guy that's really going to elevate him at the 168-pound division and tell people that this motherfucker is somebody to pay attention to. So it's going to be a really fun fight. Super exciting. Fucking both dudes are going to be throwing some serious fucking bombs during this fight. Fireworks, my brethren. Fireworks. I have to lean, of course, to the younger, physically bigger fighter in Christian Mbilli. But I definitely think Dervachenko is going to give him hell. And I would not be surprised if this fight didn't go the distance and Christian Mbilli won by split or even, unanimous decision on the cards. But I do expect Dervachenko to be a monster out there. And I'd be super, super shocked and surprised if Mbilli ended up stopping Dervachenko. Because Dervachenko has shown you in the history against Danny Jacobs, against Golovkin, against Charlo, against fucking Munguia, against Adames, that he's a tough dude. 5 losses on his resume, but every one of those losses came against an elite world champion fighter. Mbilli is not that, at least not yet. So, for him, this is opportunity to showcase himself and put himself amongst that group of people who've previously beaten Dervachenko and then, of course, went on to become world champions. It's a great fight. I'm super stoked. It's a card that obviously isn't getting too much attention, but, there's a lot of casual, pretend boxing fans out there that just would rather talk about the same old bullshit day in and day out and actually ignore the sport of boxing. And that's fine. Fuck those guys because they're just pimping boxing to fill their pockets full of cash. They don't really have boxing's best interest at hand. Because if you did, you'd be showcasing this fight. You got fucking Abdullah Mason on this card, future pound for pound best fighter in boxing. And then you have great fighters from one of the best divisions in boxing at 168 pounds. And then you even have a really, really competitive heavyweight matchup on this card. So literally, it's giving you everything as an American boxing fan you should want. I mean, you would be very, very, very unsurprised to end up seeing fight of the year on this card, even though obviously we just had a fight that got tons of attention and people are calling fight of the year the Ortiz versus Bohachuk fight. But I thought that fight was great, but there's still lots of room for a fight to be much better than that. That's not the end all to be all. Don't be surprised if Dervachenko versus Mbilli is a way better back and forth matchup than that fight. But leave your comments below. What do you think of this matchup? What do you think of this card overall? Which fight are you most excited to see? Leave in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.